name is Muriel Robison. I'm an equality law consultant and I have been involved in undertaking training on this project. The Equality Act, through regulations that came in 2012, requires public authorities to impact assess their policies, any new policies, and indeed any revisions to policies against the needs of the general duty, that is the general equality duty, to eliminate discrimination and harassment, to advance equality of opportunity and to foster good relations. Now, as well as the Equality Act, the Human Rights Act obliges public authorities to ensure that they are complying with the articles and principles of the European Convention on Human Rights. So equality and human rights impact assessment, if it's done properly, gives organisations an opportunity to ensure that they're meeting their legal obligations both under the Equality Act and under the Human Rights Act. The general equality duty does apply to all public authorities, but the Equality Act lists those authorities that require to comply with the specific duties. And the specific duty to impact assess policies is one, therefore, that applies to certain listed public authorities, although it would be recommended that all public authorities carry out an impact assessment because it's a crucial aspect of ensuring that your policies meet the legal obligation, both the general equality duty and the obligations under the Human Rights Act. When you're carrying out equality and human rights impact assessment, you need to know about the provisions of the Equality Act, and you also need to know about the articles and principles in relation to human rights issues. However, it is helpful for public authorities to have an understanding of the other international human rights standards, and so we might recommend that you look to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, on the Convention of the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, on the Convention for the Elimination of Discrimination against Women. Also, there is the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which you ought to take into account, as well as the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. Well, undertaking EQHRI is no easy task when looking at areas such as housing, education and transport, for example. And it's important that assessors are supported and undertake training to ensure that they're aware of and have knowledge of not only the Equality Act but also the Human Rights Act principles. And that is the only way to ensure that equality and human rights impact assessment is carried out properly. And one good starting point would be to use the e-materials in this project as a starting point for any training. Well, I think that public authorities have been undertaking impact assessment for quite a number of years now. And since the Human Rights Act has come into force, public authorities have also been required to comply with its terms. And so it really is an opportunity for public authorities to combine their obligations under both the Equality Act and the Human Rights Act. And I think that this is it is relatively novel, but it's a very good opportunity to ensure through one approach, which is the Equality and Human Rights Impact Assessment approach, that public authorities are meeting their legal obligations. Well, obviously there are huge risks in the sense that they can be challenged for failures in relation to the Equality Act, and they can be challenged for failures in relation to the Human Rights Act. And so this is undertaking equality and human rights impact assessment is one way to feel confident that you are managing those risks and hopefully that you are not facing challenges in the future. I would say that it is much more appropriate to use equality and human rights impact assessment in relation to policies. Obviously, organisations have to take what we call a proportionate approach to this. They have to give consideration in the first instance to whether or not their particular policy impacts on a large number of people and whether it might disproportionately impact on particular disadvantaged groups. And so it is not the case that it would be sensible to undertake equality impact assessment, quality and human rights impact assessment in relation to every decision that's made. But I would say that public authorities would benefit from undertaking equality impact assessment in relation to the policies that they are introducing.